Join Boise State Public Radio for a concert with blues guitarist and vocalist Coco Montoya at the Treefort Music Hall in Boise, February 13th. This concert is in honor of longtime KBSU DJ Arthur Ballinger, who is retiring after 47 years. Doors at 6, concert at 7 on the 13th of February for a night with Coco Montoya at the Treefort Music Hall. Details at boisestatepublicradio.org.
It's The Connector, Idaho Daily News. Good morning. It's February 4th. Happy Tuesday. I'm Troy Oppie. This morning, tax cuts advance in the state legislature, as does a bill changing Idaho's execution method to firing squad, plus new legislation that would leave voters high and dry if they forget their ID at the polls, and expanded services for youth mental health in Southwest Idaho. All that and more this morning on The Connector, Idaho Daily News from Boise State Public Radio. Let's start with some good news, shall we? 4 people who didn't return from a weekend hunting trip in the Owyhees have been found. The Idaho Statesman reports an Owyhee County Sheriff's Office staffer says 3 adult hunters and an 8-year-old on the trip were located Monday afternoon. After more than 50 hours in the wilderness, they are safe and uninjured. Search and rescue efforts began Sunday. After the family notified law enforcement, the group hadn't returned as expected. Multiple agencies were involved, including the Idaho Air National Guard, which flew one of multiple aircraft over the area. To the State House now, where a Boise Democrat was the deciding vote Monday afternoon to advance a bill that permits funds from the state's Empowering Parents Grant program to be used for private school tuition. Idaho Ed News reports the proposal from Republican Senator Dave Lent would boost the grant program from $30 to $50 million a year and lift the cap on individual grants from $1,000 to $5,000. Democratic Senator Carrie Semmelroth told Ed News another provision of the bill, $30 million in dedicated special education funding for public schools, is what won her over. Semmelroth teaches special education instruction at Boise State. The bill also has some accountability measures for schools to qualify, including testing and data reports, plus a requirement that 95% of the grants be reserved for families making $80,000 or less in adjusted gross income. Prior to the 5-4 vote that advanced the bill to the Senate floor, the committee heard public testimony, which was mostly opposed to the bill, with only a few in favor. House Republicans cruised to an easy win yesterday, passing their latest tax cut proposal that totals $253 million. James Dawson has details.
Personal and corporate income tax rates would drop by nearly 0.5% to 5.3%. Retired veterans' military pension would be exempt, and capital gains on precious metals like gold would no longer be taxed under the plan. Those cuts, along with proposed increases to the grocery tax credit and property tax relief, total more than $400 million. Democrats like House Minority Leader Elena Rebell say that figure is far more than the state can afford.
If we do this, there is no chance we're ever going to be able to end grocery taxes, which is the thing I hear from my constituents that they want. This completely takes that off the table.
House Majority Leader Jason Monks rejects that, saying the growth in economic activity and more people moving to Idaho will eventually outpace the loss in revenue.
We'll pay for those needs by cutting our taxes because the state will get more money in the long run.
The bill now goes to the state Senate. James Dawson, Boise State Public Radio News.
Idaho is one of 6 states where someone who forgets their ID on Election Day can show up at the polls and sign an affidavit in lieu of showing that ID. Republican Senator Brian Lenny, however, has introduced a new bill that would get rid of the affidavit process. He says it opens up an unnecessary lane to commit voter fraud.
You cannot purchase alcohol without a photo ID. You can't go to a bar and sign an affidavit saying you're 21. You can't buy cigars or cigarettes without an ID.
Anyone who lies on an affidavit in order to vote can already be charged with a felony. A similar proposal came up in 2023 at the State House. Then Democratic Representative John Gannon said only about 1,500 voters had used the affidavit process in the previous November election. That's according to the Idaho Capital Sun. That bill failed on the House floor. Idaho Secretary of State Phil McGrain did not return a request for comment yesterday. The newly introduced bill needs a full hearing before it could reach the Senate floor. More from our James Dawson now, who lives at the State House this time of year. He reports on House lawmakers choosing whether to ditch lethal injection as the state's primary execution method in favor of a firing squad.
The bill passed along party lines Monday would promote the firing squad from Idaho's secondary method of execution to its first choice. Supporters say Idaho needs to be able to swiftly kill death row inmates. They cite the growing scarcity of lethal injection drugs as one major factor in delaying executions. Lamont Anderson, who heads the Idaho Attorney General's Capital Litigation Division, says lengthy court battles are also a problem. He says one death row inmate, Gerald Pizzuto, argues one of the drugs would poorly interact with his medication.
Bullets aren't going to interact with medication. We're not going to have that problem.
Just 2 people testified against the bill, including Diana David, who leads the Idaho chapter of a group for survivors of gun violence.
As someone who has witnessed what bullets do to a human being, it's brutal, it's gruesome, it's violent on the most evil level you can imagine.
House lawmakers will take up the issue next. James Dawson, Boise State Public Radio News. Whether Boise State Public Radio brings a smile to your day, some inspiration, or a greater connection to Idaho and the world, we're proud to be here with you. Federal funding, about $1.60 per person annually, helps keep these trusted services strong and accessible to everyone in our community. Learn how you can safeguard local public media stations like ours by visiting protectmypublicmedia.org.